Madam Deputy Chairman, I rise to support the concept of a national housing policy, but I am afraid I cannot lend my wholehearted support to the policy as it has been framed. Madam Deputy Chairman, housing is an issue which should not be looked upon from a partisan angle, and I want to make it very clear right in the beginning. I will try, and it will be my effort not to introduce any politics into this question. I want members of both the sides to rise above petty partisan considerations and discuss this fundamental question. This basic issue in the spirit in which this House should discuss it. Having said this, Madam, I would like to state in the beginning that I am extremely disappointed by the manner in which this document has been drafted and presented to the House. I must confess to this disappointment truly and genuinely. This is an effort on the part of the government to evolve a national housing policy, and it is not a shelter policy. There is a wide difference between shelter and housing, and this is something which has to be clearly understood. Housing constitutes a physical matrix in which human interaction occurs. The houses that people live in touch upon almost every facet of their life and of the society as a whole. Housing, therefore, is not only a social or an economic issue, but it is also a major sociological factor which determines the kind of society that we want to build up and the quality of life of the people who live in that society, who are members of that society. Therefore, Madam, the first point that I would like to make is that when we are discussing the housing policy, we cannot discuss shelter in isolation. The housing policy must include within its ambit and overall economic policy of the government. There must be an indication of the policy frame in which we propose to solve this problem, which is an essential part when we are discussing the national housing policy. This is the first deficiency which I noticed in this document. It does not deal with the policy frame, the economic policy frame in which we propose to tackle this problem. We are talking of slums, and we are talking of the pressures on housing or the lack of it in the urban areas. Now, can we talk about it without discussing the shift of population from the rural to the urban areas? Can we talk about it without discussing the kind of economic progress in which we are entering? I am sure that the Honorable Minister is aware of this position, that the Honorable members of this House are aware of this position, that in the last few years there has been a tremendous growth in the service sector of our economy. And what has been the result of that? The service sector, which includes hotels, tourism, insurance, and such other forms of economic activity, has attracted large numbers of people into the urban areas. In fact, the rate of urbanization in this country is a part of our economic development, but it is extremely alarming in its proportion. If this is going to be the kind of influx into our cities from the rural areas, then it is very clear that in the urban areas, the entire structure is going to collapse under the weight of this influx, and unless therefore we have a policy frame which reduces the drift from the rural areas into the urban areas, talking about housing either in the rural areas or in the urban areas does not have any meaning. As a result of that pull, a lot of people are coming into the cities, and on the other hand, there is a push effect in the rural areas because agriculture is lagging behind and unemployment is increasing in the villages, and the people are bound to move into the cities. Therefore, Madam, the first question which I would like to ask the Minister is in what manner this policy envisages to curb this trend to move of movement of the rural people into the urban areas, because providing amenities to the urban areas, it is well known, is far more expensive than giving the amenities and the facilities in the rural areas. So this is my first point. The second is that the policy does not define, Madam Deputy Chairman, the size of the problem either as it exists today or the size of the problem as it is going to be in the future. The minister has just now claimed by mentioning various figures, achievements which the government has made. But I would like to say that so far in the last 40 years, the government is merely tinkering with the problem. We have only touched the margin of it. We have never cared to get to the core of the problem. This policy document, if it is implemented, will only be marginally touching the problem. Mr. Vice Chairman, sir, as a basic human need, shelter comes next only to food and clothing. Even the early man discovered caves to seek shelter against the vagaries of nature. Today, with rising population, many of the developing countries have to cope with and suffer malnutrition, disease, illiteracy, and hunger. Yet, it is the housing problem which seems to be the most intraceable one. About one fourth of the world's population is either houseless or lives in abysmally poor and unhealthy environment. In India, sir, according to the 1981 census, 2 lakh urban households and another 4 lakh rural households have been without shelter. Taking into account the overcrowding and the awful congestion and the need to replace the kacha houses and repair the degraded and dilapidated ones, the actual housing deficit is to the tune of rupees 59 lakhs in urban areas and 188 lakhs in rural areas. The deficit of housing is expected to rise to 39 millions by the year 2000 AD. Sir, 25% of the urban population in India lives in slums which are without basic services. Another 20% of the urban population consists of households that are slum dwellers and live in single room units. Sir, this is the housing scenario in our country at the moment. In the early years of our planning with the weak economy that was inherited at the time of independence, housing was not or the top of national agenda. The first priority obviously was to provide food for the people. A massive national program and endeavor has resulted in self-sufficiency in food, and we can be legitimately proud of our industrial progress also. In the sphere of communications and health services, we have made major strides, and the government has also intervened to ensure that clothing is provided reasonably to people in the country. With a fair amount of success in the other spheres, the attention now has obviously to turn to housing and, of course, to education. In the last decade, quite a few schemes were promoted for encouraging housing activity. For the first time, a policy of housing has been formulated to grapple with the situation. It seeks to provide affordable shelter to every citizen in the country by the turn of the 20th century. Experience has shown that housing units raised by the official agencies for the poor are too expensive, and the intended benefit does not reach the beneficiaries for whom the schemes are launched. Now, the housing policy acknowledges the imperative of bringing the prospective beneficiary to the center of development process, and it emphasizes on evolving the people in the housing and the development programs. This is a welcome change, a welcome shift in the strategy to combat the problem. Man has always had the instinct to build a shelter for himself. Nothing else explains the mushroom growth of slums. However, a slum dweller being in constant fear of being evicted from the land when he has encroached upon does not really spend much on building a shanty for himself even by his own standard. If he were to be assured of the security of tenure over that particular piece of land, and if that were not possible, if he were to be offered an alternative developed piece of land and provided with the basic services like water and sewage system, street lighting and other important amenities, and also offered some small loan on soft terms, I am sure that every household will be able to build for itself a house which would conform to the basic minimum housing norms postulated by the housing policy. Sir, Gram Panchayats, municipal committees, and the non governmental organizations could also be associated in this national endeavor, particularly in the process of disbursement and repayment of loans, and also for encouraging the cooperative societies, thus relieving the government of some burdensome task. Sir, today you know that the price of land is escalating at an unimaginable rate. Big business people, big land developers, and property dealers enter into the business of real estate, which leads to speculation, and this has raised the price of a small housing plot to such a high level that at least 60% of the population cannot afford even a plot of 15 square meters, which is the minimum norms fixed for housing in the urban areas by the government. Sir, it is in this perspective that I say that any housing policy can serve a useful purpose only if the task of developing the land for housing purposes is taken over entirely by the government. The role of private builders in contributing to the housing activity in the cities cannot be undermined. But cases are not wanting where people investing their lifelong savings in a house plot have been cheated by the property dealers. Land mafias have come up in almost all the major towns and cities of the country.